We'll give each candidate 2 minutes for a closing statement. Our official timer is Bailey Gilson right here in front, and Bailey's going to give you a signal with the caution light when you have 15 seconds remaining on the 1 minute and 30 seconds remaining on the 2-minute program. So, and we ask you in the audience to withhold your applause so we can move along as quickly as we can. Our panelists who will be asking the questions are John Bridges, anchor of KPLC TV, Crystal Stevenson, the editor of the American Press, and Eric Cormier, Senior Vice President with the Chamber of Southwest Alliance. And so we welcome all of our candidates and thank them for participating. We have with us State Senator Sharon Hewitt, Attorney Hunter Lundy, State Representative Richard Nelson, Dr. Sean Wilson, and Mr. Stephen Wagensback. So let's thank all of our candidates for coming today. And let's begin our questioning with John Bridges.
Thank you, George. The first question, there's been much talk about tax reform. Specifically, we want to know, do you support the elimination of the state income tax? And if so, how would you replace the funds that are currently in the budget for that?
Senator Hewitt.
Well, thank you for that question, John. Yes, I do support getting us to zero state income tax, and we are already on a path to doing that. You know, the legislation that we passed 2 years ago and that the voters approved through a constitutional amendment has already lowered our income taxes from 6%, 4%, 2% to 4.25%, something and something. Right, so for those states that have state income taxes, we are among the lowest in the country. And what I like about what we have done is that it is, we have a trigger built into the law that basically will lower the bracket automatically when we hit certain revenue streams. So as we say we're opening the door to business in Louisiana, and businesses choose to come here because we have a long-term view, we will have more revenue and continue to lower our brackets as they have done in North Carolina. So I'm very happy with what we are, where we are. I think our first look will be January of 24.
Mr. Lundy.
In part, yes. I've said for over a year now we can eliminate state income tax for 65 years and older, our senior citizens who make less than $250,000 a year, and we will keep people from moving out of the state of Louisiana. And that loss of income to the state or the revenue to the state will be offset by the property tax that they pay because they continue to live here. It'll all be offset by the sales tax because they continue to live here. We do not want migration from Louisiana any more than what we've had. We don't want to lose any more congressional districts. And so in 4 years from now, I was asked the question, what will you tell people? I'm going to tell them they're moving back to Louisiana, that we have the best state in the land. So we have the best agriculture community, we have the best waterways, we have the best industry, and more than anything, we have the best people. So 4 years from now, you can ask that question. But right now, yes, we need to eliminate the state income tax for elderly people, and it'll be offset by them staying in the state.
Representative Nelson.
So I've spent the last 5 years or so fighting to eliminate the income tax. I brought bills in 2021 as a comprehensive plan to rework Louisiana's tax system to make it look like Texas and Florida, states that grew 6 times faster than us in the last census. I brought those bills again after we had about a year study committee to look through the entire tax code. I refined that package, brought it again this year. It's very comprehensive. I think there's a lot of things you got to change. The tax code is kind of like a big Jenga puzzle. You can't just pull out one block, the whole thing falls over. So you have to have a comprehensive approach. That's what I've done in the legislature. I have a package of 5 or so bills that would accomplish that. Basically, you broaden the base of the sales tax, you broaden the base of the property tax. That's how you replace the revenue. You shift a lot of the state spending back to the locals so the locals can take care of their own problems. That's how things work in Texas and Florida. That's why they're successful. I think doing that is one of the best things we can do to really throw out 100 years of Huey Long-style government, concentrated all the power and money in Baton Rouge, and has really caused ineffective government and people to leave. We're losing about 40,000 people a year right now in Louisiana, while Texas and Florida are prospering. So that's something that I fought for, and I will continue to fight for as governor.
Dr. Wilson.
When you look at the tax structure of our state, you can't take an all-or-nothing approach. The reality is it's been proven that people aren't leaving just because of the personal income tax. They aren't leaving because of that structure, and eliminating it is not going to cause them to stay. The challenge we have in our state is that we make changes, and I think we have made some meaningful changes to be able to trigger that and lower those amounts based on revenue, but we have yet to see what that looks like. We have yet to see what that is going to affect and how it will affect the people of Louisiana. And so before we make a commitment to lower it further, let's understand what are the changes that we've already made in law and how will that affect our budget, because you don't want to be in a position that you have made some drastic changes and have no resources to repopulate the budget that you currently expect or would expect. We've seen how that story ends. It is never pretty because you're going into deficit, and that is what's going to really cause folks to leave the state of Louisiana when you look at crime, roads, healthcare, infrastructure, and all of the things that we should be investing in, as opposed to just looking at giving money back and not meeting our obligations as a state.
Swagger say.
Yes, it should be our goal because people are already leaving Louisiana. We're down about 90,000 people over the last several years. We're down 3,000 jobs. So since COVID, there's been about $100 billion of investment around the country that has flowed to the southern economies around us, but not coming here because this is a tough place to do business. This is a tough place to live as a family. It's expensive. Inflation's driving everyone's budget through the roof, including working families. And yes, we need to provide tax relief everywhere we can in a smart, responsible way. Lowering the income tax should be done responsibly. That means as you focus on economic growth, when the economy grows, you don't dump that new money in government spending, you dump that money in lowering rates. We can do that with a simple majority vote in the upcoming legislature. So I will focus on economic growth, and I will focus on economic growth to bring in new jobs, new opportunity, and yes, new revenues. And when those revenues grow, we're going to lower rates accordingly and put a boa constrictor clause on that. That's the best way to do that because the states around us that are winning, they're attracting new families and businesses. They're doing it for a host of reasons that we'll talk about today. One of them is a low tax burden, and that means lowering our income tax rate as quickly and as effectively as we can.
Our second question is from Crystal Stevenson, and we'll start with Ms. Mundy.
The process is in motion to award a contract for the new Interstate 10 Calcasieu River Bridge utilizing tolls. If this plan falters between now and December, do you have a plan to fill the $850 million gap to get a new bridge built?
Yes, there's money in the state budget that was not utilized in this last session that could have been going to this bridge. You know, there was kind of a battle between the politicians in Baton Rouge, which has been the problem we've had for so many. There's been delay, we slow walk. You know, a bureaucrat is one who's defined as a person who's more interested in the process than he is the object. My object is to get this bridge built. And we're going to do it quickly. We will have the money. We will get it from a combination of the federal government and from the state budget. We had extra money this year. They chose to do something differently than what they did. And so it's now a safety issue. And so for the sake of the people of Louisiana, we need to get the bridge going now. So yes, I have a plan, and we will, the current plan will the work towards it won't be shoveled, but there's not going to be a toll when I'm the governor of Louisiana. There's a way that you can be done when there is no toll. So I'll have the money. Thank you.
Representative Nelson.
Sure. So I think that, you know, one of the big problems here is that we have the state being in charge of too many things, especially on a local level. You know, my comprehensive tax plan, like I said, would really give local communities the ability to solve some of their own problems. And I think when you shift some of those infrastructure issues and let locals solve it, that frees up money on a state level so we can focus on these state level problems like the Baton Rouge Bridge, like the Calcasieu Bridge. And that's really how I would like to see it be fixed, is that not just a one-time pop to let's fix this one problem, but let's look at it comprehensively. Let's let the local governments fix those roads so the people in Shreveport aren't arguing about Mandeville fixing their local highway. Let's let the state focus on these big major projects. That's where I would put our focus so the state can fix these big problems. And I think there's definitely money if the state prioritizes that over the local issues and lets them solve their own problems. There'll be plenty of money to fix these larger issues.
Dr. Wilson.
We're talking about a United States interstate system, and that's not going to be something that can be done at the local level. I will tell you, if we falter on this opportunity, you're only driving the cost up and putting the people and the desires over the last 25 years at further risk. A year delay will cost another $100 million. You're talking about a $2.1 billion project in today's revenue value. There are two projects in the state of Louisiana that are going to cost $5.5 billion. That's how much we spent over the last 7 years in the entire state of Louisiana. So let's put that in perspective. Tolling is one of the many ways that we can do it. There's tremendous innovation and creativity and risk management in this proposal that's out there today. It's only going to hamper us, and if we falter this, you not only lose money that you've invested up to that $800 million, but you also lose contractors. And recognize that this is not something that just a regular contractor in the state of Louisiana can do. Go back to Mobile and see what happened when we pulled the rug from under that project. Folks walk away from that. That is how you do business and deliver real infrastructure, and this is the only way that you're going to see it in the near future. So I do not have a plan if we don't, because we attempted to pay this once before with $3, and that did not work.
Mr. Wagensback.
The premise of the question is if the plan fails, I would say that it can't. Because when you look at all the high priority projects we have in the state, I would argue this bridge might be one of the most important, not just because of the economic potential it has for this region, not because of the gridlock that you all face each and every day, but because of the safety hazards. We know this bridge is about 20, 25 years past its usable life, and so the duct tape and twine that we have holding together is not going to work, so it cannot fail is what I would say. Look, inflation and what I'll call a robust plan has driven that spike up in price. Hopefully, by the time this construction is all the way through, because it will take several years, hopefully inflation can come back to earth a little bit. We can do some, the feds have to do their part. I would argue that as inflation hopefully comes down, some of that cost estimates hopefully come down. If that happens, we set those savings aside in a fund, and we use that savings at the end of the project and put whatever we have towards reducing the impact of the toll. That way we at least have a plan that if we can be more efficient, if we can scale that back, if hopefully inflation comes down, any of those savings aren't just dumped in the Baton Rouge to be used in a general budget, but in fact we can use that to lower the cost of the toll going forward.
Senator Hewitt.
Thank you, George. Well, I'm a Barb High School graduate, and I earned my driver's license by driving over that bridge, and that was a few years back. And here we are still talking about the bridge. You know, we absolutely need to get this project done. And there are, I do believe that the P3s, the public-private partnership, I was probably one of the first people that talked to you about that, George, many years ago. That is a very successful model around the country, and it is something that I think can work and should work here. But there are other things that we can do and we need to do to better deliver infrastructure in our state. The Department of Transportation is not a well-oiled machine. Y'all, we're at a D+ in terms of ranking across the nation in our infrastructure, our roads and bridges. We need to do a better job of streamlining the operations and pushing decision-making to the lowest possible level. It should not take 10 years to build a turning lane in Slidell when you're comparing that to widening I-12. We can do better. We also need to take salaries out of the budget and use that for asphalt and pay for that with state general fund.
Our next question comes from Eric Cormier, and this is for Representative Nelson to start us off.
Candidates, we have representatives of the 8 regional economic development organizations here today, including the Southwest Louisiana Economic Development Alliance here in Lake Charles. And what we want to know is, what are your thoughts about the present thought form of LED now, and what are your plans for the future if elected?
So I've been all over the state, and I've talked to a lot of the economic development offices around the state, and a lot of the locals, the local chambers, and I think they're relatively critical about the current state of LED. What I would do is have a study and look at best practices around the country that have been successful. I think North Carolina is a pretty good model, and really just do a comprehensive study about how we can restructure LED to really serve the needs of Louisiana. I think that just in my conversation around the state really needs to happen, so that I think we have an LED that's more responsive, that really is responsive both to the businesses and to the locals, and really serves as a better conduit of getting people together. Louisiana has a lot to offer. I think especially our geography, our transportation, our infrastructure, everything is really in place to be very successful. And I think LED is kind of the conduit that, in sometimes, really falls short in conducting that. So I think a comprehensive study of those best practices around the country, and then I would bring that here and implement it, and then have, I think, a forward-looking LED secretary that would implement that plan and run with it.
Dr. Wilson.
So the leadership of LED is going to be where it starts. You have to have an international search to find folks who can come in and really lead and provide a vision for the state. You also have to have someone that can work collaboratively with RITOs as well as the chambers. And then you have to look at the structure of LED and figure out, it served us well. Fast Start's a great program, but there's room for improvement. It's not going to continue to rest on its laurels. And so we have to be thoughtful about how we revise and reform that department. We have to make sure we make the kinds of investments we recognize that dollars are going to make a difference. And when you really invest in infrastructure, you start to attract people here. The projects that we've evolved and developed at the Department of Transportation under my leadership were projects that we heard about 20 years ago, but never ever had an administration make those investments. When you build infrastructure and leverage the assets like ports, like rail, like highways, like the maritime industry, you can then make shovel-ready sites, and you have to do that with the local organizations to make sure you have a statewide plan and a vision that we're not competing against each other, but that we're competing globally for opportunities to come to Louisiana.
Ms. Wagstaff.
Just like Les Miles ran Nick Saban's playbook for about a decade to success, the current LED is trying to run Stephen Moray's playbook from 15 years ago. And I don't think that works. I think the market has changed, the economy has changed, and quite frankly, different leaders have different skill sets. So you really have two choices with LED. You can go out and find a new rock star, whether it's a homegrown or an out-of-state rock star, and hope that they can do that. Or you can decentralize, you can depopulate. You can not just partner with the local regions, but actually deploy assets to those regions. I prefer the latter. I think the new day of economic development is no longer throwing incentives at a project and hoping it comes. I think the new day of economic development is training workers, getting people who are ready to work, go into the high schools, put soft skills, reading, writing, soft skills, all that, so that workers come out ready to work day one. I think if we have a qualified workforce, I can go recruit any company in the world to come and take a look at Louisiana with everything else we can offer. That's the new era of economic development. To do that effectively, you deploy the assets out of Baton Rouge into the regions, partner with expertise on the ground, and then all of a sudden that partnership will lead to the results that we can sell to the world quite effectively, I think, in the current day.
Senator Hewitt.
Look, economic development is the engine that drives everything. Without economic development, if you're not growing and building things, you're just dying. And that's what we see happening right now in Louisiana. The out-migration numbers are evidence of that. One of the things I know we have to do is we have to look at all of the incentives and the things that we're doing. What's really working and what's not. What is actually bringing business here and what is just icing on the cake, right? Just state dollars that we're kind of throwing away. And I think we do need to have a strategy, a statewide strategy on what are those kinds of economic development opportunities that we want for our state. Not everything is going to be a good fit for Louisiana, but we need to be forward-thinking in what those opportunities are and then build the pipeline of skilled workers and people that can meet those needs. Because you know, the first thing site selectors ask about is workforce. Do you have the workforce that can do my jobs should I come to Louisiana? And we have to work together to do that better.
Mr. Lundy.
Just one additional response to the previous question. A toll is a tax, and we're talking about getting rid of taxes. We'll create a parking lot on 210 if we put a toll on that bridge. Now, going to the LED. I've been all over the state of Louisiana. I've been all over the world. You know, electing a governor is about electing a leader, someone who can do it. Yes, we have to have consensus. We have to work with the legislature. We have to work with local politicians in order to have the economic development that we have. But right now, we have the best state in the land. We have the waterways. We have 32 ports. We have 5 deep water ports. We have the best agriculture. And yes, we are going to capture the money that needs to be captured through these federal government programs to do the things that we need to do for economic development in the state. And so I'm a consensus builder, not a grenade thrower. And so, but I've been a leader for 40-something years, the CEO of a firm, small businessman, and an advocate all over the country. So as the next governor, we will have a plan that is very effective, and I'll share a little more about it with you in just a few minutes.
All right. Next question from John Bridges for Dr. Wilson.
All right, thank you, George. We'd like to know your view on the necessity for incentives for new industrial projects, and what would be your policy on the industrial tax exemption program?
So I'm the only candidate that said at the very beginning I would maintain the changes that Governor Edwards made, including having local authority in delivering resources that are locally created, giving them away. I do think it needs to be more efficient. I think there needs to be a centralization of that effort at the local level, and they need to have the resources to make the right decision. In regards to incentives, the biggest incentive to bring business here is workforce and infrastructure. Those are the two things that we will spend dollars on. We give away a lot of money in terms of tax credits and rebates to different industries, and that all offers value. But when that company leaves, we've lost that value. I'm more interested in making sure the value stays here, our building infrastructure, and providing the resources that are necessary to grow the economy and bring additional folks in. The other incentive value that you have to have is you have to run your numbers, and you have to understand that we want them to be good, responsible citizens. And so whether it's with carbon, whether it's with hydrogen, whether it's with windmills, whatever it may be, what's their contribution to the quality of life that we're offering here in the state of Louisiana? We want them to be a good neighbor and not just a good business.
Swag's back.
Apologies, Kim, but Sasol has publicly said in years in the past that they would not have been here without the previous ITEP exemption program. That is a fact we have to understand. And raise your hand if you wish Sasol never would have come here to this area. I don't see many hands. So the truth is the new ITEP proposal an improvement in some ways? Yes, it is. But the other way worked pretty darn good for a long time to bring a lot of industrial parts as well. The 80-20 split is a good thing. Locals deserve upfront investment. They need those resources to provide to be the good partner there. I love that part. And on local upgrades and things like that, the tightening there's been some good development there. That has been a more responsible evolution. But if big companies are planning multi-billion-dollar investments 10 years out, they need certainty. They need to be able to look at a state and figure out what's going to be on the table. That's why we have to tweak those long-term major investments, and that's the tweak I want to do while protecting the 80-20. The last piece is Dr. Wilson's right. Fast Start is a phenomenal program. We created it in 2008. It continues to be that to the day. Training the workforce tomorrow, having our kids build jobs here is the best economic development incentive we can produce.
Senator Hewitt.
Yes, I agree with the 80-20 on ITEP. You know, locals need some revenue. We know that your law enforcement, first responders and all that are delivering services during the construction phases, and so we need to have that. I also believe that locals need to have input and authority over approving the ITEP deals. What's missing is not all of the locals have an economic development organization, as you do here, that can provide the economic analysis to sort of balance both the short-term cash flow and the long-term return on investment. So when you're presenting to school boards or sheriffs or local entities, their mindset is different, right? A school board member is looking at, how can I get more money in the classroom? They're not thinking about, what's the benefit of this project to my community 10 years from now? And so I think we need to find ways to provide more economic data to those decision makers, both either through local economic development organizations where they exist, if not, provided through the state.
Mr. Lundy.
Yes, some candidates have short memories, but the question was asked a long time ago about ITEP, and it was whether or not we would codify or agree to Governor John Bell's 80-20 executive order. And the answer that I gave then was that we will wait. Do I think the executive order is good for the 80-20 split? I do think that. I think government needs to be at the local level if at all possible. But at the same time, we do not need any problems with individual parishes that try to disrupt that. And so I know that there's been actions to go ahead and codify it, and not codify, but approve the 80% when there's a 20% rejection. So I'm all about economic growth. We're going to do whatever is best for the individual parishes. And yes, I spent over 60 years in Southwest Louisiana of my life. And so I'm very interested in being able to grow Sasol and all the industries here and grow the projects that we're doing here as well as the rest of the state. So we've got the natural resources to do that, and ITEP needs to stay the way it is right now.
Nelson.
Sure. So, I would maintain the 80-20 split with ITEP in the short term, but I think in the long term, we really have to get away from this tax credit and tax exemption mindset. I mean, we really need a low and fair tax structure that benefits everybody. We don't need to pick winners and losers. We don't need to set it on a state level for local governments giving away taxes. And that's really what my comprehensive tax plan is all about. You phase out the corporate franchise tax, you phase out the inventory tax. That's how you create a long-term sustainable structure. Getting rid of the personal income tax is an important piece of that, I think, in order to be competitive with states like Texas. But I would mirror what Texas does because it's effective. It's effective at attracting everybody, not just big chemical plants, but manufacturers of every degree. In Louisiana, we have ITEP, but it's not very effective at attracting anyone except big chemical plants that have natural reasons to locate here. So I think you need a broader and more comprehensive tax reform, and that's really what's going to drive the jobs of the future come to Louisiana. Instead of having, Baton Rouge basically pick winners and losers, which is what we've had for the last 100 years. I think these broad policies will will be the driver of the future growth of Louisiana instead of just, handing out checks.
The next question from Crystal to Ms. Wagensback.
What is your plan to fund the $14 billion backlog of infrastructure projects in the state?
Well, the infrastructure backlog is severe, and it's probably even more severe than people even realize, because if we finally put our port system under a strategic plan and do a better job of maximizing those investments, you probably have to add some to the $14 billion. So I hate to make the premise of the question worse before we get to a solution, but I think that's what we face if we truly want to compete with Houston and Mobile. Look, the good news is there is some help coming along the way. I was proud to support and work and help design a bill that was passed by the legislature a couple of years ago to put vehicle registration fees into transportation away from the general fund. That will come up in a couple of years, peaking in 2025. There will probably be a push to unlock that dedication. I will fight to the death to protect it. We need to keep those recurring funding streams going to infrastructure if we have any hope to be backing on that. I do think 3P projects are an important piece. We have to always be looking for private sector partnership and investment to come in and make these projects work. We continue to just depend on the taxpayer and the big capital to solve all these problems. We will never solve this program if we don't bring in some 3P opportunities as well.
Senator Year.
Thank you. Well, I think the backlog is officially closer to $16 billion, but I will also say I served on the Transportation Committee for 4 years. I think there's a lot of projects on that list that no one's interested in anymore because they've been there for so long. We've already given up and moved on and had another solution. So the first thing you need to do is you need to clean up the list, because I think, and I know in my district there's a lot of projects that don't need to be on there. I think the other thing you need to do, and I began talking about that earlier, is we have to do a better job of delivering more asphalt putting more asphalt on the ground. And one way to do that is by taking salaries and benefits out of the Highway Transportation Fund. So this is one of the few departments that we're funding with your 16 cents a gallon. We're funding the entire department. It's a big number. I'm not saying that we can do it overnight, but what you do is if you move those salaries and burdens into the state general fund, where everyone else is funded, it forces you to tighten your belt in many other agencies, right? And it allows you to put more asphalt on the ground.
Ms. Blondie.
Well, some say 16 billion, some say 18 billion. It comes down to priorities. And so we have to get our priorities straight. And so our infrastructure is one of the biggest hindrance to outsiders coming to Louisiana. It's the biggest hindrance to insurance rates. Our property insurance rates are high because we got bad roads. So we got to get our priorities straight. And so we got to get this bridge built. Baton Rouge needs to pick the location of where they want their bridge built. We need to fix one at I-67 and 20. These are main thoroughfares that we got to take care of. It comes down to leadership and priorities, and we can't have games played at the legislature like they were this year, where the budget was closed and they concurred. Nobody knew what was in the budget. They got 15 minutes, the legislatures can tell you here, to determine what's in the budget, what's been taken out of. As the next governor, that won't happen. We got to know the laws to keep that from happening. We just need to enforce the laws that exist. So I have a priority. We will make the priorities of what we're going to do, and we'll do it. Thank you.
Representative Nelson.
So it costs more money. The problem is that we set the gas tax in 1990 or so. I think I was 4 years old, and we haven't raised it since then. And so guess what? It's not the same. 16 cents doesn't go as far as it used to. So unless we get more money, we're not going to pay for any of this stuff. All this other talk is just magic, right? We're not going to find more money. You take it out of the general fund, well, now you got to find money to replace that money. That's not going to happen, and that's why the legislature says, hey, 5 years from now, we're going to take $300 million out of the fund. I think what you really have to do is allow local governments to vote, or local parishes and local cities to vote to increase the gas tax so that the citizens have a voice in that. If they want their roads fixed, they can vote for it, and they can have that money, and it will be dedicated to fix their problems. I think that at the end of the day, that would allow you to get money from an increased gas tax without the state setting the priorities, without the state putting it all on the roulette wheel of state government. I think that that's the way to fix it. And I think that you would have it fix, the money actually going to fix those local priorities instead of it going through the whole budgeting process and having it get the whim of the governor and the committees. And really, without more money, you're not going to fix any of these problems.
Dr. Wilson.
Take it from the doctor, the backlog is actually 18 billion. And if you add the multimodal backlog, you're up to 21 billion. The reality is the gas tax is only worth about 5 cents per gallon, and we've got some really bad debt structures that date back to 25 years ago. We need to modernize the way we've done debt like we did the major projects that we've talked about. When you hear legislators talk about the highway priority program and projects not being necessary, they vote on that every year. The reality is our economy is built on the infrastructure we have, not the infrastructure we want. We have to take care of what we built, that 16,000 miles over 12,000 bridges that have been ignored. And you've heard a lot of good information that's relatively accurate in terms of what it's going to cost and how much money is going to get there. And yes, we're going to get $300 million, and I was happy to see that. Remember, we attempted to do that in 2017, and the legislature refused to vote on it because you had a Democratic governor. If you want real solutions, you got to look at the policies, look at the impacts. This is what we've done. In order to fix the backlog, you have to have sustained investment and go with new revenues from other alternatives, which is why you have to have an above-the-board, all above-the-board approach, whether it's tolls, whether it's garbage bonds, whether it's smart decisions. That's what it's going to take to lead this state.
Next question from Eric Cormier for Senator Buick.
In light of the United States Supreme Court ruling and state government reaction in the Alabama redistricting case, if courts rule Louisiana should have 2 minority congressional districts, what type of leadership would you provide in support of such a legal decision?
Well, that's an interesting question because, as you know, I led the redistricting effort in the Senate and can absolutely defend the 5-1 maps that we have. You know, our population has not changed very much over the last 10 years. So, nor has the demographics of our population. So it should not be a big surprise that our map that we just drew looks very similar to the one from 10 years ago. Section 2 says of the Voting Rights Act that the minority is not entitled to representation in proportion to their population. And I'm not quoting it exactly right. But the adage that, you know, because we have a third minority, we should have 2 congressional minority districts is just factually not true. The Voting Rights Act, Section 2, specifically says that that doesn't need to happen. Now, having said that, it is all in litigation. And if the courts say that in Louisiana we need to draw a 4-2 map, then I would hope that the legislature, who has the authority and responsibility to redistrict, actually does that and not the courts.
Mr. Lundy.
No, one of my favorite scriptures is Micah 6:8, to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with the Lord. And so I'm a justice guy. So we're going to follow the law. And whatever the law says, that's what the state should do. And I believe that's what the legislature should do. I mean, I worked for a federal judge that was, and worked on the opinion of Kirksey versus City of Jackson. I'm familiar with the City of Mobile, the lawsuit, which says we can't dilute vote based upon race. So I know that we're going to follow the law. And so whatever the redistricting is, if it goes through the court system and then it comes back and the court says that's what it is, that's what it is. So that's who I am. That's who I'll support. And I won't play favors.
Thank you. Representative Nelson.
So I would follow the Supreme Court ruling and create 2 competitive minority districts. I would just point out, too, though, is that we're probably going to lose the 6th congressional district in 2030 if we don't do anything different. So it's only going to be a short period of time for this to really matter. And we're going to have to fight this whole battle over again. So I think that's my playing in the broader picture is we need to do something to stop losing 40,000 people a year so we stop losing congressional seats like we have for the last 40 years. So we should have the 2 competitive minority districts, but at the end of the day, we need to fix this long-term trend or you're going to continue to lose congressmen and it becomes even more or less of a problem.
Dr. Wilson.
1/3 of 6 is 2. Simple math. The reality is you have to support the Supreme Court decision, and we start to reject those decisions, whether we agree with them or not, we're in trouble. There are several decisions that have come out of the Supreme Court that I don't agree with, but we accept and we enforce, and I think we should enforce this one as well. And it's my hope and my prayer that the judge creates that decision because we've attempted to do it twice. We don't want to be like Alabama. Alabama is going to Alabama every chance they get. And they've already rejected the Supreme Court of the United States of America's decision to do what they needed to do. And I think that is going to be all of the impetus that Judge Dick needs to be able to create the maps that she's asked to get done. And I think that is going to make a difference. That's what you have to do in this country. You have to have some order, and we have to stop the extreme ideologies that are going to force people to pick and choose what they want when a unanimous decision or a split decision of the court. It is the decision of the court, and we have to honor and respect that. And there's too much time at play. There's too many issues that are important for us to deal with today to go back and forth on minutiae. So I would support the Supreme Court decision.
Mr. Wagner.
As governor, my job will be to uphold the law. And so when the court comes to a final decision, a final verdict is rendered, I will uphold the law. Pretty clear and simple. 10 years ago, the last time we redistricted as a state, there used to be something called pre-clearance, where you would go up to the feds, the DOJ would kind of tell you in advance whether you met that requirement, so you could go and you could debate the numbers and the lines with the pre-clearance from the feds. This is the first time it's done without pre-clearance. And so this is the new era where you go in and after the fact you get told. That's why it's dependent on the courts to make a final decision, because it's new territory on how to draw maps. But I'll tell you this, I want to give you one perspective, because really it's a question about race. I want to give you something with the eyes of a first-time candidate, because I am a first-time candidate. I've been around this state talking to a lot of people. Let me give you the glass half full of this whole debate. When you talk to people in this state, I don't care if they're black or white. The truth is, we all have so much more in common than we all realize. And look, this is an important debate, and we'll follow the law, but just rest assured, whoever occupies these offices in the years to come, they're going to do right by Louisiana. It's the same issues facing black families that face white families, and we need politicians who can talk about united issues as compared to divided ones.
All right. Next question from John Bridges, and this is for Mr. Lundy.
Crime is an ever-increasing concern to all of our residents here, not only in Southwest Louisiana, but across the state. What is your philosophy to make Louisiana safer? And with our high incarceration rates, what can be done to rehabilitate those in prison for nonviolent crimes to prepare them for jobs on the outside?
Well, education is the answer, John. We got to see that when they get out of prison, that they have a GED or they have an associate degree, they can even get a college degree, but they have to be able to work. People that are in prison don't want to go back. If they have a job and if they have a place to live, then they'll go back. Education is the key to the poverty that we have in this state. And so we're the number one poverty state in the nation. We're sitting in a room full of blessed people. But you need to drive around Louisiana, and I've been in the slums of Nairobi, and I've seen 2 million people live in poverty. And we have issues here. But we can keep that from happening. Most of your crime occurs in poverty areas. Your drug dealing in blighted areas. So we can fix that, and we can reduce recidivism with education. So I have a plan that involves the faith community, the private enterprise, and governmental entities that will reduce recidivism and put people back into productive lives in our society.
Representative Nelson.
So I think this is a short-term and a long-term problem. In the short term, I think we got to have more cops on the street. That's a big problem across the state. I think we got to use the state troopers to supplement those high crime areas and increase patrols there. We just had a big state trooper class. We raised supplemental pay in the legislature, supplemental pay for local police, as well as increase the pay and salary for state troopers. So hopefully that helps with recruitment a little bit. I think we have to look at juvenile facilities, having more juvenile facilities available so that we can really take kids that are committing these crimes, get them off the streets, get them the programming they need so that they become productive citizens and we don't put them into a life of crime. And then I think we really have to look at the long-term issues. That's why I focused on education. That's why I focused on bringing economic opportunity. And I think reducing recidivism is important as well. I brought a bill in the legislature that basically said, let's look at all these local jails that are housing half of our prisoners. Let's make sure when somebody walks in the door, we need to say, can this guy read? If he can't, let's get him to read before he goes out. He doesn't have a GED, let's get him a GED before he goes out. He doesn't have any work skills, let's get him a technical certificate, let's get him something so when he goes back on the street, he has the skills to make a living. I think that's what we have to focus on. That's how you change it.
Thank you. Dr. Wilson.
We've got to invest in that issue. So whether it's working with supplemental pay, creating more officers, there's not one police department that has fully staffed themselves for the job that we're asking them to do. And we can't expect that state police can augment them because they're down 200 officers as well. The reality is we have to make long-term commitments to this issue. Part of that is going to be education, but part of it is the reentry program. Technology is going to be great to give equipment and support to local law enforcement and to collaborate as a whole of government response to address crime. But the reentry program works. It's a proven model for reducing recidivism. Prior to COVID, it was only 16%. And it's about a 5,000 differential for those who are in prison that are in the general population. You get your high set, you get 2 different certifications, and you have to have a job before you leave prison. And then you actually maintain the rest as parole. It works. We have to make that a universal approach, not just at the state level, but at the local level. That's where it starts. The long-term impact is going to be education, workforce development, and creating jobs and opportunity across the state of Louisiana.
It's a lot to cover in a minute.
Yeah.
Look, here's this quick skinny. We have a juvenile crisis in the state right now. Coming out of COVID, what happened was when everyone would sit home for far too long, by the way, what happens is a lot of bad effects happen. One of those was the gangs figured out. A lot of these kids were recruited. So now when you talk to sheriffs and frontline police and DAs out there, what they say is they're picking up juveniles and there's nothing to do with them. The feds won't allow you to put them into an adult jail, and that's not the right thing to do anyway morally. And so we do have a lack of juvenile facilities to where you can come and take a kid in and either figure out who needs treatment or, quite frankly, who needs detainment. There's actually a great example going on in Calcasieu right now, just down the road. They have a great facility that is doing just that. I was able to tour it 2 weeks ago. It's phenomenal. But you have to find a way to take those juveniles off the streets and figure out treatment or detainment. The other piece is drug courts are not being used anymore because of the mandatory minimums. People are avoiding it. We have to re-inject the power of drug courts to get people clean so they can go back into a job, not back into a life of crime.
Senator Hewitt?
Thank you, George. Yeah, crime is a huge issue. And the fundamental basis of what causes crime are a couple of things. One is drugs, and the other is mental health. So one of the things that we can do is to significantly increase our investment in mental health. We don't have any place for people to go that have mental health issues. They end up in the emergency room or they end up in jail, and it's just a rinse and repeat. We're not taking care of the mental health issues in our state. We also have drug issues. Most of the people that are in prison are there, and drugs is kind of part of the deal. I passed a bill this year that directly attacks fentanyl. Fentanyl is one of the biggest issues in our neighborhoods right now, and it's in everybody's neighborhood. And so what my legislation does this year is it throws the book at the first, second, third offenders that are either manufacturing fentanyl or are dealing fentanyl so that we can get that out of our state. The rehabilitation or the reentry programs do work on paper. We passed that 6 years ago. I'm not convinced it's working in our state, and we need to get the data to determine whether it does or not.
All right, the next question from Crystal for Representative Nelson.
Will you continue to support the Medicaid expansion that was put in place by Governor Edwards?
Yes. I mean, we're a poor state. It's like a 90% match for the federal government. I don't think that there's a reason for the poor state in the country to turn down the taxpayer money from the good folks in New York, Florida, Texas, and California. So, yes, I would continue to support it.
Dr. Wilson.
Absolutely. It's about saving lives and helping people become healthier because that's going to change the future of our workforce. It's also good for business. It balances the budget. It gives us some stability in how we allocate resources. And more importantly, it's going to allow us to make some of the changes that we talk about wanting to make. Remember, one of my previous answers was we make changes to laws and we don't give them an opportunity to be implemented. Well, from an implementation standpoint, you have to have some stability in your system before you make those changes. Having the stability of what this has offered us makes absolute sense, and there are opportunities to expand even further to address the mental health crisis that we have in our state. It's also going to help us in terms of the long-term care of individuals and others that we need because we're living longer, because we are now healthier. But we have to double down and say, yes, we've got 500,000 more people on Medicaid. 50% of our people live on Medicaid or Medicare. We have not necessarily had the increase in the healthcare professionals to be able to address that. So, again, it's about sustainable improvements across the state of Louisiana, and I would absolutely do that, and I've been there day one.
Yes, I will continue it. We have to recognize there's a price and opportunity of doing so. The price is this. Over the last decade, our budget has gone up about $20 billion, and Medicaid's almost half our budget. That's a big spend. We've got about 42% of our population in Medicaid. That is not a sign of a healthy economy. So we have to drive down that number, even while we keep the expansion. The opportunity is this. Our health outcomes are terrible right now. If you look at every list, we don't have good health outcomes. So having coverage, whether it be Medicaid or private insurance, does not lead to healthier people. The opportunity is this. All these people on Medicaid, we have to help them get wellness preparation. That means putting incentives in place, some restrictions sometimes, to make sure they're doing the little things, getting regular checkups, getting certain treatments, eating healthy, or doing the exercise, or whatever it takes. We need to put incentives in the program to make sure we can do preventative wellness. If you talk to doctors, hospitals, insurers, they all say we have to get better at that. And every primary care doc I talked about who sees their markets crumbling also wants some of those incentives because that'll bring people to their offices so they can get that better doctor-patient relationship on the front end as compared to the back end in an emergency room.
Thank you. Yes, Medicaid is like half of the state's budget. And we are doing a terrible job, and I will keep the Medicaid expansion program because it's important for everyone to have health care. But part of the problem is in the implementation of it. We have so many people on the rolls that are not eligible. They don't meet the income eligibility to be on Medicaid. Medicaid is intended to be a backstop, not a final destination. And so we need to work to get people that have private insurance off of Medicaid. We need to help get people with jobs, right, where they can afford to pay for their own insurance or their employer pays for their insurance. We do have nearly half of Louisianians are on Medicaid. It is not a sustainable model. And we need to do better, I think, in terms of evaluating and making sure all of our systems within state government are talking so that we have the money for the services that for people who really need it. And those that are able-bodied, we need to help them and get them back to work.
Mr. Lundy.
Short answer is yes, but I'll use my full minute to go back to the other question. The other question is that it was Governor Jindal in Wagasback that destroyed the juvenile justice system in Louisiana. They destroyed the charity hospital system, which we had the best in the country in Louisiana. I can go down the list. They took $700 million out of our UL system and put all our universities at a risk of having to earn money and raise money. And basically, the state schools are now like private schools because they're tuition driven. And so there's many things that can be done. But paying our policemen, going back to your previous question, we have to pay our policemen. We have to pay. We're the worst state in the nation at paying firemen. Almost the worst paid policemen, almost as bad paid teachers. So it comes down to priorities. Are we going to do the right things for the right people, and we got to have the right leaders? And so that's how I want to answer the other question, because I've been in the New Orleans East. I've seen what's going on. Thank
Next
you.
question is from Eric Cormier for Dr. Wilson.
The Public Affairs Research Council warns of a coastal cliff where state funding for coastal restoration and protection projects plays out in the coming years, particularly as the BP Deepwater Horizon funds are exhausted. Will you lead the charge to continue funding shoreline resiliency programs along the entire coast?
Absolutely. You have to protect the entire coast because it's a part of Louisiana. There are families that are north of that coast all across the southern portion of our state. I think it's important for us to realize that it is not a panacea. The funding that we have will expire. Now is the time to start to invest in infrastructure banks and come up with other new revenues, whether it's a result of carbon sequestration or if it's a result of wind or hydrogen. There's some other opportunities out there to be able to leverage costs to meet our priorities. If we don't make the financial commitment, we'll be in the same place with our coastal infrastructure as we have been with our transportation infrastructure, that legislatures of the past passed these projects, created these priorities, but did not properly fund them. We saw it with the BP project. They gave us $680 million for $1.3 billion of projects, and people wonder why things don't get done. That's how we have to be responsible and have sustainable decisions as it relates to coastal protection, because without that, you never have the opportunity for insurance reform, you never have the opportunity to have additional economic growth in those communities, and you never have the opportunity to protect the lives of the people that are dear to this state.
Yeah, it's a huge priority. Our state is living on an active delta that is being starved of sediment. And so if we don't invest in our coast, that means we don't invest in our existence of our state. So it's a non-starter. It must be invested in. Look, I was proud to be part of the team that negotiated that settlement, that put those huge dollars into the coastal restoration program for decades, and proud to do that. While some folks have got involved in that suit to enrich themselves, we were working hard to enrich the state in the coastal protection program, so proud to do that as well. But look, we have to be honest, we need federal partners on this, no doubt about it. We need more of our reserves off of the Gulf of Mexico. Right now, it's not just the existing investment of oil and gas in the Gulf, it's also the future investment of wind and other new technologies that are going to happen over there. We need more investment coming to states like us. If we're going to be the state that services and provides the American energy industry, if other states continue to say, we're not going to produce, we're just going to rely on Louisiana, we deserve more investment from the Gulf of Mexico for that, and that has to all 100% be dedicated to the coast. Because the settlement that we provided from the BP funds is about to run out. We need a new investment from the feds to keep it going.
Thank you. Coastal restoration is critical. My entire Senate district goes underwater by the year 2050 if we do nothing. It's scary. So there's a few things that we can do. First of all, you know that about 25% of the coastal restoration funding comes from the oil and gas industry, and it is through royalties that they pay on offshore drilling. We are only getting 37.5% of that money. All of the other federal lands around the country are getting 50%. So it is very important for us to continue to work with our congressional delegation to get that changed. And we also want to make sure that we do get royalties on offshore wind that may happen right here in southwest Louisiana. Those are very important to helping us continue to protect the coast, because we have to protect our infrastructure. We have to protect our ports. We have to protect the maritime industry that's servicing the oil and gas industry. We have to protect our seafood. And we can do all of that, but we have to have the money to do it. And I think that, again, our best opportunity is going to be working with our federal congressional delegation.
Yes, I think some people need to check their facts. The general administration wanted to settle the BP claim for $680 million. So I don't know where they came with that figure, but the Attorney General at that time, not this Attorney General, came behind them. And there was an $8 billion set of money that went to the state of Louisiana for coastal restoration. So it's that money that's been carrying the restoration program. And so we have to find the new money. So I agree with the Senator, we got to go Mesa, and we got to make sure that we can get more than the 37%. The rock walls that have been built from one side to the other, they do work. They helped us in the last 3 hurricanes. Because, we took a beating down in Cameron, and another was after Rita, that we didn't quite take from the floodwaters from Laura and Delta. So we need to look at the numbers, we got to find the money, and we're going to continue to do and support coastal restoration from shoreline to shoreline, from east to west.
Thank you. Representative Nelson.
So the federal government has $32 trillion in debt. They're going to be financing it at 7%. I don't think they're going to have a lot of money to throw down to Louisiana to help us fix our coast. I think we have to save ourselves. I would say the only way that we're going to do that, to fund the $50 billion master plan, is we have to have a dynamic and growing economy. We can't be losing people. We can't be losing businesses. That's why you need a comprehensive reform to really change it, to really grow Louisiana. We can't continue to fight over a shrinking pie. That's not going to solve our problems. We have to focus on growing it. And so that's really the platform that I'm running on. I think that's what we have to do. Looking for everybody else to solve our problems, that's what we've done forever. We jump from crisis to crisis, hoping that's going to bail us out. And, eventually the music stops and we're going to be where we are. So I think that we really have to focus on growth. We really have to focus on a dynamic economy. That's how you'll get the money. This is a money question. We have a coastal master plan. Everybody agrees on it. Everybody votes for it every 5 years in the legislature. It gets, 105 green lights in the House. And so I think you really have to look at how are you going to fund it, and you're really going to have to do it ourselves.
All right, John, next question.
Over 100,000 acres of federal waters off the coast of Lake Charles have been set aside for auctioning for lease sales in order to develop wind power energy development projects. We want to know, what policy would your administration employ to protect and continue Louisiana's offshore wind development?
I couldn't remember. Thanks for telling me, George. Ooh.
I couldn't either.
Kindred spirits in that sense. Look, I'm an all-of-the-above energy guy. I always have been, always will be. And I think that benefits a state like Louisiana. You figure out who is investing in the next generation technologies for energy development in this country, who's doing wind, who's doing geothermal, who's doing carbon capture. Here's the funny little secret. It's the same existing energy companies that have been investing for years, and it's the same Boudreaux's and Thibodeaux's who've been drilling holes and building pipeline and servicing these assets for years. And so the good news is Louisiana wins either way. Whether we focus on existing energy resources or the next generation, as long as we have a state that's open to investment, open to providing that workforce, has a tax code that is absolutely open to creating those investments, and a legal environment that doesn't punish people for coming to invest here, we can be a winner in the existing energy world and the new energy world. So as governor, I'll do whatever it takes to keep those providers here, get as much of that R&D investment we can, and make sure we have the workforce to support that industry as it grows and prospers in the years to come.
Senator here.
Thank you. So my background is oil and gas. I was a senior executive for a major oil and gas company. Oil and gas is going to be our bread and butter for a very long time. That is one of our God-given natural resources. And we will continue worldwide providing energy for the world. Do we need to diversify our portfolio? Of course we do. This is a free market. We need to give opportunities to those companies that want to invest in wind south of here, an opportunity to do that. Let's take what we have learned from the oil and gas industry and make sure that we apply that in the wind business. For example, we don't want to end up having a bunch of orphan windmills like we have orphan wells, right? So part of what we have to do is to make sure we're protecting the state's interest and make sure that we have the abandonment funding from those companies in advance so that when their lifetime has ended, we're prepared to clean up the waterways and clean up our onshore wherever we make those investments.
Mr. Lundy.
Yes, I'm all about all of the above, that we have to do just that for the state of Louisiana as the next governor. My job will be to just whatever funds we can get to better the state, whatever jobs we can create. That's what our goal is. And so, yes, we're gonna rebound in the oil and gas industry if the administration changes in Washington, and we're gonna grow the sustainable alternative energy sources, the green energy sources. So I'm all about the windmills. I'm all about green energy, and I'll share more about that later. But I mean, that's what we have to do. That's the leadership. It's about getting dollars into this economy so we can grow, we can sustain, the livelihoods of Louisiana. It's about destroying poverty, giving people jobs, and using the education and using our private enterprise to do it. I'm all about private enterprise. And so the market is dictating what we do right now. You got the biodiesel plant that Shell's spending $1.6 billion on. We can go on. Thank you.
Representative Nelson.
So I support offshore wind energy. I think that, we have to look at everything we can do. As far as private investment coming here, we should support it no matter what. I would produce a regulatory environment that's conducive to getting things done and not hold everything up. I think that that's one of the, major impediments to investment, if you have an uncertain regulatory environment. And as long as it's private capital, I don't want to put taxpayer money. I don't want to subsidize it. I want, as long as it's private individuals and private corporations that are putting their money at risk, and they think building wind farms off the coast of Louisiana is a good investment, I'm all for it, and I support it 100%.
Dr. Wilson.
Absolutely, I would support the renewable industry. I think it's important to recognize that we have natural assets here that we can leverage and have leverage, which causes them to be here. Not only the businesses, but our port infrastructure and our workforce that's here already in place. And as governor, I will work to make sure that we provide the support structure like we do for every other business that comes here, that we help them develop, we help them grow, and we help them be responsible and good neighbors to make sure that they proceed and they operate in a way that's safe environmentally for our waters off the coast, as well as for the recreational fishing industry. But the most important thing that we can do is whatever revenue we get, that we appropriately allocate it to priorities of the state, whether it's the coastal issue we just talked about and the lack of funds we have to do that, or if it's around infrastructure that we need to build, or education, or criminal justice, whatever it may be. Let's take those resources that are going to be generated and be smart and sustainable with them, because that is going to cause others to want to come to Louisiana and make similar investments with their dollars and not necessarily just with incentives or with the state dollars.
Well, we've had a lot of questions asked and a lot of answers, and now we're going to give the candidates 2 minutes each to do a wrap-up, and we'll start in the order that we're seated here. So let's begin 2 minutes with Senator Sharon Hewitt.
Thank you, George. I think one of the best predictors of the future is what you have done in the past. So I would ask you to not just listen to what everyone is talking about and what they say they're going to do, but also judge us in terms of what we have already accomplished with the opportunities that we've had. I have, developed leadership skills as a senior executive in a major oil and gas company. Many of those skills are very transferable to being the CEO of the state of Louisiana. I have negotiated major deals with other major oil companies. I managed the state's budget, the company's budget 1 year. So I'm very good at negotiating, let's say, economic development deals and understand how to manage a $44 billion budget. In the legislature, I've passed about 125 bills. These aren't the rename and the bridge kind of bills. These are bills that I believe are going to move our state forward. Things dealing with education, delivering a better education for our students, talking about literacy and STEM and math, workforce development, so that we're putting our people in a position to get jobs that you as employers have ready and that we anticipate 5 years from now. Focusing on safer neighborhoods. Everybody wants safer neighborhoods, and I have passed legislation to do that. Talking about a more affordable lifestyle and a booming economy. You do that with lower taxes and lower insurance. It's all affordable. We didn't talk about that today. Those are things that I have been working on in the 8 years that I've been in the Senate. I think it prepares me very well to lead the state of Louisiana, and I would very much love the opportunity to do that. You can read more about our campaign at SharonGood.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lundy.
I've been an advocate for over 40 years. I've also been a small businessman. I've been a resident of this community most all my life. Yesterday I was in Concordia Parish, and I was with people that are friends, supporters that are involved in businesses all over the state. They told me and authorized me to say that they're gonna build a green hydrogen plant on the sulfur mines, and it's to start now. And in the next 2 years, they'll employ 300 people. And they're going to use, they came to the parish earlier, I think Winfield Little presented it to the police jury, and they created a solar farm. So they got 1,500 acres of solar panels that they're going to be put there. This is a 4,000 acre piece of property. So they're going to build these green hydrogen plants all over the state of Louisiana. There's so much going on right now that we can use. And yes, I thank Sisal too for green belting the 2,000 plus acres that they operate on today and the things that they've done. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to be able to speak to y'all today. But I mean, things are happening in Louisiana. And so you need a governor that can lead, that has relationships. I've been an advocate. I've traveled the world. I raised 3 children. My oldest is not my biological son, but he's been calling me dad since he was 10 years old. And the 2 brothers live on a farm in Beauregard Parish. One of them's a ship captain, one of them's a fire captain. My daughter teaches in the community college here. So I'm vested in the state to make the state better. I'm equipped. I have the knowledge. I have the ability. And so if God allows me to be the governor, I'll be the best governor Louisiana has ever had. And I'm a free enterprise guy. I believe government should be the best at the local level and go up. If you have any questions after this, I'll share them with you. But go to Hunter Lundy for governor. Go to LundyForLouisiana.com. I tell people if you want to donate $1, give $1. If you want to donate 10, give 10. If you want to donate 5,000, I'll come cook for you.
Thank you. Representative Nelson.
So if Louisiana were just average, if we were just average in the country, we'd all live 4 years longer, get a 33% raise. If you drive across the border into Texas, guess what you become? Average. You get 3.5 years of your life back and a 33% raise. That's a tragedy. That is the cost of bad government. We haven't had a congressional seat in Louisiana since 1910, over 100 years ago. That's how long it's been since the population growth in Louisiana actually grew faster than the rest of the country. We have big problems, and they've been around for a long time. Now, I'm 37 years old. I'm an engineer, an attorney, an Eagle Scout, a former diplomat. I've been all over the world. And I can tell you, good government is what makes a difference in people's lives. There's no difference between the people in Beaumont and the people in Lake Charles. No difference between the people in Tyler and the people in Shreveport. It's just bad government. So that's what I'm running on. I've been in the legislature. I brought the bills to comprehensively change the state of Louisiana, to comprehensively rewrite our tax codes so that we're like the states that are growing. So we're like Texas, we're like Florida. That's how you fix this problem. You got to throw out 100 years of Huey Long, and you got to rebuild something that actually works. It's not reinventing the wheel, but I've put in the hard work for the last 4 years to do that. I've been pushing it around the state, and that's what we have to do. You need big, comprehensive changes. Now, this was college football. If it was college football, if we lost to every team, every year, we would fire the coach, we would fire the trainers, we would even fire the mascot. And in Louisiana, we keep sending the same politicians year after year running the same plays, and nothing ever changes. So if you're happy with the status quo, if you're happy losing 40,000 people a year, I think there's 16 other people in this governor's race. You can pick anyone, and things will stay the same. But if you want that 4 years of your life back, if you want a 33% raise, I'm your only choice. Richard Nelson running for governor. Thank you very much.
Dr. Sean Wilson.
So if you want to have someone that's going to traffic in the extreme issues that are not going to make us safer, healthier, smarter, or wealthier, you can vote for somebody else. I'm the guy that is going to be committed to putting the people of Louisiana first and the things that will move them. I'm the guy that's got 25 years of service working in Republican and Democratic administrations, always with transparency and integrity. I'm the guy that's worked with folks in Washington and folks in Washington Parish. I'm the guy that's worked with sheriffs, police chiefs, mayors, town halls, you name it, delivering with limited resources and making a way when there was no way. I'm the guy that helped move this project called the Calcasieu River Bridge to the closest it's ever been to being reconstructed in a way that's been transparent, following best practices, and not subject to the political shenanigans that oftentimes take place in Baton Rouge. We have been in a wonderful place over the last 8 years, coming from a $2 billion deficit to a $2 billion surplus, having paid down tremendous debt, having passed really good bills, having done good for the state of Louisiana, but we did it collaboratively. No other candidate is going to be able to give you that experience of working with folks across the aisle in a very genuine and intentional way but me. That is why I'm running for governor. I want to help this state be the best it can be. And that's going to improve the quality of life. It's going to make us safer, healthier, smarter, and wealthier. No other candidate has the preparation that I have. I've been to school to learn how to do this. I've got a degree in urban planning. I've got a master's in public administration and a PhD in public policy. I'm a product of the public school system. I'm married to a 20-year educator. We've got two beautiful kids, 28 and 22, and two wonderful grandkids. We want them to be here to contribute and experience the life that we've had. If we want to move Louisiana forward, if you want to do what's in your heart for the best, if you don't want a governor that's going to run away from you, but a governor that's going to work with you and talk to you, I'm the guy for that position. I'm Sean Wilson, a candidate for governor. Visit us online at wilsonforla.com. God bless you, and thank you all for having us today.
And finally, Mr. Stephen Wagensback.
You know, I want to thank you for inviting us here today. We've talked about a lot of important policy issues, all of which make a big difference for our state's future. But the most important issue facing Louisiana today we did not discuss. And I want you to think about this. The most important issue facing today is a culture of low expectations. For as long as I can remember, we have been sold a lie coming out of Baton Rouge, that it is what it is. Louisiana is not capable of big change. Enjoy the boom times when you got them, because the bust is coming, so just be prepared for the roller coaster. Folks, it's a lie. It's been peddled and bought by all of us for decades. I quit a good job to run for governor because I'm ready for the lie to stop. And I'm ready for the truth to begin. And the truth is we can do anything any other state can do. We are just as capable as any other state. We just have to take control of our state's future. The truth is, if you go back 100 years ago, the 1920s, when we first defined how we're going to fix problems by sending everything to the capital, hoping it trickles back down to the communities, we did our Constitution. We did that. At that time, in the 1920s, we had 1 million people more than Florida, 3 million less than Texas. Considering their size, I'd say that's the same starting point, and we launched. They depended on locals at that point in time. 50 years later, we did a checkup. It was the 70s, the boom time. Everything was rolling. We had money everywhere. We went back in the Constitution. That had been the perfect time to look to our east and west. What are they doing well? What are we doing poorly? We should have learned back then. We didn't. We pivoted. We doubled down on the old approach. We said we like our plan. We're sticking to it. We did the Constitution, same old Huey model. 50 years later after that, it's today. This is our 50-year checkup. This is our moment to look in the mirror and see if we like what we see or we don't. I don't like it. I love the Louisiana people. I love what we stand for. Our culture, our family, our faith. It's awesome. I love that about us. But if we keep trying to win in the modern economy with a glass half full, we got nothing. In the post-COVID era, people on the move, businesses, families, they're moving south. There's billions and billions of dollars moving south. We're not getting any of it. If we take control of our future at this point, demand better and higher expectations, we'll finally get it, and we'll finally start winning. WagsForLA.com.
I think we've heard some great answers. Let's give the candidates a round of applause. We know that you all could have come up with some excuses why you cannot be here, so we appreciate your time and your position to come here. I also see, I know I'm going to get in trouble, but I see our Senator John Kennedy with us. Senator, if you stand up, we're glad to see you. We do want to thank our panelists and our candidates for coming, and Sasol for sponsoring our candidates forum. And now, next is legislative. It will begin promptly at 11:30. Thank you.